Join Time Magazine's lead education reporter alongside global educators and advocates to explore the impacts of teaching forgiveness.
I teach forgiveness because it can have a positive impact in my students' families.
It helps my students thrive in the face of adversity.
Students who can forgive are happier.
Join us to hear from teachers and thought leaders on how and why to include forgiveness in your classroom.
Temperature rise will bring widespread devastation and unprecedented extreme weather.
New coronavirus cases emerge across the country.
Obesity rates have more than doubled in kids.
Cape Town is running out of water.
Good morning and welcome. Today we'll be presenting about enhancing emotional well-being of students for improved learning outcomes. While the audience is building and we allow for further participants to join our call today, if you would like to introduce yourselves, if you could please go to the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen, where you could share your name, perhaps where you're joining us from this morning, and your educational context. It'll be lovely for us to see who we're chatting with and who we're sharing in our educational network this morning. Okay, as participants join, we'll just give another minute or so for those to join us before I formally start. Thank you. While we await our participants, if there are any of you waiting patiently with us, please remember the hashtag World Edu Week hashtag that you can use should you wish to share any feedback or your experiences or thoughts from today's session. Right, good morning again. Anyone who has not yet introduced yourself, please feel free to do so. In the chat, you can just drop us a line of where you are joining us from this morning. And just remember, should you wish to share any of the feedback or maybe a picture, a screenshot of your experience on our session, to use the hashtag World Edu Week hashtag on your social media platforms. All right, thank you. Okay, so welcome again. Just to introduce myself, my name is Catherine Clulo, and I'm a teacher here at SEK Dublin International School in the Republic of Ireland. Some of you might recognize or be a little confused by my accent. I am from Cape Town, South Africa, having recently moved over to Ireland with my husband last year and joining the SEK Dublin family and the SEK Educational Group company in February this year. We're very glad that you've joined us this morning, as we're going to be sharing about strategies that our school uses that we aim at enhancing the emotional well-being of our students for improved learning outcomes. Myself and our team join you this morning from Greystones Island, and for context, we're in a relatively smaller than probably comparative to some of you middle and secondary school, but we have a wonderful growing international family. Before we start today's session, there's a quote that I thought was very appropriate to the topic we're speaking about. And this quote I take from Matthew Ricard, who once said, "Happiness is a skill. Emotional balance is a skill. Compassion and altruism are skills, and like any skills, they need to be developed, and that is what education is about. To give a little bit more information to any audience members who may not be familiar with our school, the SEK company was established in 1902 with the original school and still our current head office being in Madrid, Spain. And in 1935, the Segonia family took over the running of the school and its development, and amazingly, just over 3 generations, the school and the company have grown that we have 10 international schools and a university that we can be proud of. 6 of these schools and the university are based in Spain, and the others are dotted around the globe. There's one in France, one in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and of course us here in the Republic of Ireland. The SEK Education Group pride themselves on service of building achievement and striving for better society, and bring together leadership, educational innovation, and many, many years of tradition and history. For today's topic, we recognize and we acknowledge that every learner is unique. And with this, each of them will have different experiences or reaction to their educational journey. And it's our place to create a safe space with established routines, reassurance, connectedness, as well as relevance to those individuals. And with doing so, we'll be facilitating their well-being and complement their development, be that emotional, physical, social, and academic, and encourage the adoption of a passion for lifelong learning. I would like to take a moment to introduce our 3 panel members this morning. First of all, we have Dr. Monica Prieto. She is the principal of SEK Dublin International School in Ireland, a highly experienced and involved individual in multiple spheres of the IB programs. Dr. Prieto has more than 20 years of international experience working in program development, organization and coordination, and has worked in a range of different capacities. Today, she'll be discussing and sharing with the group our school's initiative about encouraging behaviour for learning. Mr. Gareth Finn will be our second panel member, the academic coordinator at SEK Dublin International. Mr. Finn has worked in a number of schools across multiple countries, the United Kingdom, Argentina, and Spain, and now of course the Republic of Ireland. With his background in English language and literature, Mr. Finn believes in the transformative nature of reading, and linked to this morning we'll be sharing with us the value and the benefits that shared reading for pleasure can bring to a school context. And thirdly, our final panelist this morning will be Mr. John McShane. He is a teacher and CAS coordinator at SEK Dublin, and will be sharing about the benefits of service learning, developing well-rounded and globally aware individuals. Mr. McShane has a history of more than 15 years working in education and sport, with vast qualifications and experience in a range of sports psychology and management and coaching, and is a strong advocate for encouraging healthy and active lifestyles, so encouraging our students to participate in sports and activities. Should you have any questions during our presentation, I ask that you please post these in our chat. So just to the right hand side of your screen, or at the top, you'll see that there's an icon for the chat function. You can post your questions there, and if there is a particular panelist, you direct them to, and we can address those towards the end of the session. Also, just one more reminder. Should you be sharing anything over social media platforms, please to use the hashtag WorldEduWeek hashtag. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to be shortly handing over to our first panelist, Dr. Monica Prieto, who will be sharing with us about encouraging behaviour for learning through consistent management and with positive reinforcement. Over to you, Dr. Prieto, sorry. Sorry, Dr. Prieto, we just have audio, please.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm sorry about that. Today I will be talking about behavior for learning, and it forms a key branch of student welfare in our school. The behavior for learning bridges between pastoral and academic care. And the idea is that each mutually reinforces the other, because discipline and behavior for learning leads to good academic behavior, good academic outcomes, which in turn leads to good behavior for learning and ultimately produces healthy, productive lives. Its premise is built on agency, high expectations, as well as clear and timely communication. One of the core goals of SEK is the importance of individual freedom. This policy that we have designed tries to foster these, ensure that students can access and engage with the curriculum by developing the skills and habits for good behavior for learning, which is going to result in a greater chance of economic and social and personal fulfillment. This also aligns with the key principles of the IB and encouraging elements of the IB learner profile, such as principled action, caring attitude, and living a balanced life. Discipline can be thought of in two ways. Perhaps the first one that comes to mind is as a verb. The teacher disciplines the student. But it's also another dimension, which is as a noun, where the student exhibits good discipline. And these two are mutually dependent. It's very well and it's very important for a child to stay out of trouble. But are they a good student? Are they a good learner? Good behavior is not a given. Good behavior for teaching needs a specific teaching. The first step to ensure that behavior for learning expectations is that the first step is to ensure that behavior for learning expectations are visible and prominent across the school. Every teaching space has two posters. One on the left, the one that you can see on the left, is our rights and responsibilities. Those are the rules. And this encourages students to understand that in any society or community, rights can only be guaranteed by fulfilling our own responsibilities. I'm sure this is a very common in every school in the world. The second poster, however, is based on the project for Enhanced Effective Learning, and is a series of 11 reflective questions and expectations for each learner. The range of these questions covers a broad set of skills, and effective learners have to possess these skills and demonstrate them. This is also recognized by Lang, who places importance on the foundation steps needed for us to acquire skills useful for learning. We may ask our students to discuss something, but do they know what that sounds and looks like? We may ask students to research something, but do they know how to manage and prioritize time? Do they know how to ascertain if a source of information is authoritative? These are all questions that are really relevant and important. These processes are all aspects of good behavior for learning, and good behavior for learning, as I was saying earlier, must be taught. Luckily, being an IB school, we have a prescribed structure for doing so, the approaches to teaching and learning. But how do we actually do this? Well, the answer to this question is we model and model and model again. If we require the students to use self-management and research skills, we have to ensure we teach them. So are we providing initial authoritative sources of information? Do we know that the students are able to recognize them? Do we teach how to use an index, how to conduct a search online? Or are we taking this for granted? Do we introduce the idea of time and accountability? Are we showing them how to work with time? Likewise with communication skills. Are we working on communication skills specifically? Are we showing them how to work in pairs? Are we showing them how to introduce, for example, turn taking, the ability to listen to each other, to restate and respond to what the other person is saying, to elaborate on the other person's ideas, to ask questions, to inquire how the other person, what the other person means in terms of what they're explaining. And of course, we have thinking skills. Do they know what it is to evaluate and analyze? We have to teach basic processes before moving on to these concepts. Sometimes some of the things that we can do, for example, is we put an idea, or somebody puts an idea into the classroom, and then that idea is dribbled around the classroom. So a student picks up that idea and develops a little bit on it, and then another one picks that idea and develops on that as well, until at the end, when the idea has gone through a number of people, we get a much better developed and a more profound idea. So the possible examples on how you model these processes and skills are far too many to really discuss here. And I'm sure many of you have much better ideas than the ones that we have listed here. But a question I think it's very important, and it's at the core of these, is, are we employing the teaching of these fundamental skills? Are we assigning in class? Are we doing enough of them? Are we assuming that others have done this work for us? One of the key things is, for example, that literature teachers knows the frustration of teaching DP students and finding shallow ideas in their essays, such as, you know, this concept or this what happens here makes the reader want to read on. And this appears in numerous occasions. So somewhere along the lines, it was likely assumed that the students were able to analyze a text, or perhaps there was too much time devoted into teaching the right content, not enough in developing these skills. After prominence and modeling, another important aspect is reflection and accountability. We ensure that the 11 behavior for learning traits are used as part of our assessed curriculum. We actually grade the ATL skills, and we ask the students to reflect on them as a learner. The other aspect that we include is the idea of parent-teacher conferences, where we have the students lead these teacher conferences. So in short, what we try to do is that through a specific teaching, through modeling, this kind of behavior for learning can be actually learned. So we provide these opportunities for the students to develop these skills. And we believe that by developing these skills, by specifically teaching these skills, we're promoting their well-being and we're promoting healthy lives. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you to Dr. Prieto for sharing that with us. And secondly, we're going to be handing over to Mr. Finn, who will be sharing the importance of reading for pleasure and how shared reading is a supportive strategy for the development of literacy and academics in general. Over to you, Mr. Finn.
Thank you, Catherine. If a panacea exists in education, then I believe that is reading for pleasure, not reading anything, but the reading of quality literature. The proven benefits of this are not just anecdotal, they are well documented. The Literacy Trust highlight that those children who read perform better across the entire curriculum. A 2013 report on the benefits of shared reading, that is, reading aloud as part of a group or being read to, are stark in children. There's improved positive behavioural adjustment, academic performance, and greater mental health and associated well-being. Indeed, there's over a decade's worth of published research from the University of Liverpool on the benefits of shared group and private reading on health. From cradle to grave, the reading of good literature is a form of bibliotherapy. So, as a school, we naturally want to encourage and foster greater reading such as this in our students in order to see these benefits. But the overall picture is problematic. In a report based on habits in the UK, the Literacy Trust found that as children moved through school in age, they read less frequently, less independently, and less challenging material. So we, as a starting point, looked at the state of reading in our own school. And in response to a survey, the majority of students report that they mostly did read in school. The majority also report that they mostly read non-fiction, and they mostly read for schoolwork, not for pleasure or anything else. Interestingly enough, when fiction was read, it was read again for schoolwork and not for pleasure. We also found that those that read outside of school did so very infrequently, sometimes mostly only one night a week. And the responses they gave as to why they read are very revealing. They're often very pragmatic responses: to become clever, to help me get a good job, to pass my exams, to get a good grade. Overall, reading habits and attitudes were found to be what you would say poor. Students read not for pleasure, but for pragmatic reasons. Those reasons were rooted mostly in schoolwork and mostly in functional gains, to get a grade, to get a good job. Reading essentially was seen as work. So how do we turn this around? Well, we do so with two very, very simple policies. Firstly, by normalizing reading. All students carry a reading book of their choice with them at all times. And this affords them the opportunity to read in wait times, and break times, in lunch times, indeed as a starter or as an extension in lessons. And secondly, most powerfully, is creating opportunities for shared reading beyond the curriculum, not linked to work, and certainly not linked to any kind of literary analysis, which takes place in most classes. There's no book reports, there's no written work to justify the act of reading. It's simply reading together and sharing how we feel and what we think. You might take, for example, one book such as this. The whole class has the same book. The teacher facilitates the reading aloud, the shared reading of that book. The teacher would begin the reading and do most of it. And when the time was right, based on judgment, they would invite students to read. Indeed, as time goes on, many students want to read aloud. Of course, if they don't want to, they don't have to. Now, interwoven into this reading is structured talk, which occurs during natural breaks and pauses in the story, or when participants want to raise an idea. This is structured around three different ways: knowledge, reasoning, and community. Now, with knowledge, it's students simply sharing or understanding ideas and expressing those. With the reasoning, it's when they express those ideas, justification and the explaining of complex emotional or just complex points in general. And of course, this all comes together in a communal sense with the act of listening and empathizing and collectively being exposed to very complex multiple perspectives. During this structured shared reading time, the group goes on an incredibly immersive journey that is both emotive and deeply cognitive. It may take a term, it may take 2 terms, it may take an entire year to read the book, but the benefits are deep, real, and lasting.
Right, thank you for sharing that, Mr. Finn. If there are any participants who have joined us a little late this morning, we are moving on to our third and final panelist, and we will be sharing a bit of an overview and take-home messages if you did unfortunately miss the beginning of our presentation. But to hand over now to our third panelist, we will be joined by Mr. John McShane, our CAS coordinator and teacher, to share with us about the benefits of service learning. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, today I'd like to talk about service learning opportunities for our students in SEK Dublin. Childhood can be seen as the process of well-becoming, where young people are gaining knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that will sustain them through their lives. Childhood is, of course, that formative time when we learn, and part of that is learning to be well or well becoming. It is the time when we lay down the foundations that will later become habits and attitudes in adult life. The benefits of service learning are numerous and well known. Many schools like to think that they offer a holistic experience to their students. Service learning opportunities are a key way we can make sure we are genuinely offering such holistic experiences. As a school, we set ourselves the challenge of offering authentic service learning opportunities to our students. As an IB school, we have service learning in the MYP and CAS in the diploma years. We also wanted to adopt the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals into our curriculum, and as a school in the Republic of Ireland, we wanted our students to embrace the Gosca Award. For those unfamiliar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they are a series of 17 goals laid down by the UN or Global Sustainable Development. They therefore are a good opportunity for schools to present students with real-world problems and challenges. Likewise, the Gosca Award, also called the President's Award, is a service learning challenge offered to young people in Ireland and consists of 4 dimensions: community service, personal development, physical recreation, and an adventure expedition. It can be hard for schools to find time to offer meaningful service learning opportunities. The curriculum is full and timetables can be locked. And so we made use of 3 approaches to overcome such restraints. Number 1, we looked for overlap and working through not adding onto the curriculum. Number 2, we looked at encouraging student agency and input. 3, we looked beyond the school timetable and back again. In looking for overlap, we found common ground between our existing IB program and the Gosca Award. The creativity, activity and service of CAS matched up well with the 4 aspects of the Gosca Award: personal development, physical recreation, community service, and the adventure expedition. The United Nations Self-Development Goals helped us to frame these existing MYP curriculum in real-world global contexts so that teaching and learning in the classroom could readily leap from the page or the screen to a real-world problem, pressing problem. Rather than adding to an already busy curriculum, it opened up and dilated it. A major step we have attempted to take is to encourage student input, so as to look for ideas which place in the classroom to inform what we might do in a service learning project, and vice versa. If service learning can inform what takes place in the classroom, we run a school-wide project that looks to respond in this cross-fertilization way. We will elect a sustainable development goal as a school. We will explore concrete examples of the particular challenge this goal faces. We collapsed the timetable in the 2nd term for a couple of days, and students developed various authentic responses to that challenge at a local level, and we elect a winning proposal. The curriculum in terms 2 and 3 then looks to respond to that proposal. It might be that design classes are used to develop a product and actually realize the project, or that language and literature classes are used to develop something to enable a campaign. It's unpredictable, it has to be ready to be organic, and it has to be ready to fail. But it allows for student voice, student agency, and authentic real-world learning. We also looked for opportunities to extend the school week. We expanded the Saturday program to include monthly service learning opportunities linked to the Gosca Award. And we also looked to CAS students to help to take the lead on planning and organizing these days. Alongside collapsing the timetable, using any existing after-school or weekend programs that might already exist in your school can be a real way of allowing opportunity for meaningful service learning. Many thanks for listening.
Apologies for that little glitch there. Thank you, John, for sharing with us, and to our three panelists. To you, the audience members, if there's anything you've heard about today that you are more interested in and you have some questions about, please feel free to post those into the live Q&A section, and I'll see if I can come to them. And while we go through a few questions that have been asked previously that maybe you haven't had a chance to type down yet or might just get your thinking, I'll direct these questions that we have to each panelist in turn. So the first one will be directed at Dr. Monica Prieto, and there's been a question as to, with regards to the Behaviour for Learning programs or program, what advice or suggestion could you provide for finding time to teach these behaviours? Many find that the curricula is very full as it is, so how would you advise one could actually incorporate the teaching of the behaviours? Over to Monica, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. That's an excellent question, because one of the things that teachers worry more about, and not just teachers but administrators, is time. You know, how do we fit in things that may seem to be extra within the curriculum? I think the answer is by integrating them into the curriculum, but making it an essential part of the teaching and the learning that happens within each one of the lessons. So it requires some collaboration between different stakeholders, so between the different teachers, planning together how we are going at, how as a school that this system is going to be implemented. So, you know, when are we going to be working on these thinking skills? And it's important that everyone assumes that responsibility, so that we don't assume that the responsibility of teaching thinking skills corresponds to, I don't know, mathematics teachers, or that the responsibility of teaching communication skills belongs to the English teachers. So when everybody assumes that responsibility, that the mathematics teachers also work on communication, when everybody's working along the same lines and collaborating, then we can find ways to integrate it within the curriculum, and that's how this gets developed, rather than thinking of this as something that has to happen outside of the classroom.
All right, thank you for that response. Other questions received, I'm going to direct these to Mr. Gareth Finn with regards to the Reading for Pleasure initiative. I'm going to post both questions to you before handing over. First of all, it's been asked before, does this reading have to be literature? Does it have to be strict literature? And the second is, with regard to the strategy, do you feel it's appropriate to all age levels? And if so, if you could elaborate on that.
Thank you. That's a question that often comes up. Indeed, I could have wrote it myself. It comes up so frequently. To go back to the first question in terms of time being tight, yes, it should ideally be literature. The Literacy Trust and other research shows that all reading is good and impactful for students. But the Qurills Institute, which has over a decade of research, shows that of all types of text, literature is the most impactful. So in terms of getting the most for your book or the most for your time, literature is clearly shown to be the most cognitively and emotionally stimulating and impactful on student development. It even has in some papers a bearing on moral development. Dickens, to the Anglosphere, is a well-known writer who questions the moral turbulence as a result of the last industrial revolution. And literature such as that, the audience hopefully can readily see, is something primed to mould you into a morally positive agent, you know, to an upstanding citizen. Questions of inequality, of poverty, of exploitation and so on are raised by great literature in a way that maybe a report in The Guardian is not. The sense that you live Oliver Twist's life is far more transformative, or you experience the transformation that Ebenezer Scrooge goes through is far more powerful than simply reading about exploitation of coffee workers in Latin America. It may enrage you, but it might not be enough to actually transform your perspective on how you operate and how you work as a consumer or as a producer. So literature is the most impactful, certainly. And in schools which are very pressured for time, we have to look for initiatives and things that not only work, but are efficient enough to get the most out of the time spent. The second question was about, sorry.
With regards to age appropriateness?
Sure. Yeah, well, not only is there lots of documented research on this, on the benefits for children with behaviour improving, social participation improving, and so on, and mental health, freedom from anxiety. That runs across the spectrum. I would posit to anyone listening that one of our first positive memories of education, formal education, is being read to by a classroom teacher. I remember being read to, I must have been 4 or 5 years old, growing up as a child, and Mrs. Passmore or Mrs. Beattie reading to us Enid Blyton's Magic Faraway Tree. I don't remember much detail about the book, but I remember being gripped by the story, and things such as that led me to be a reader, a lifelong reader. And your parents reading to us or singing to us, they teach us the first rhythms of our own language. And that goes all the way through to the later teen years and into adult life as well. What the Qurills Institute shows is that literally from cradle to grave, shared reading and shared stories are incredibly beneficial, even in things such as pain management, management of psychosis, especially in young males, hugely beneficial. Age or any other demographic, class, race, geography, have no bearing on this. Indeed, what's been shown is that the canon is of quality, that it's a great leveler and uplifter for all demographics, regardless of age, regardless of background.
All right, thank you for those responses. And if I just have a look through our other questions, I think our last few are directed. I will pass them over shortly. Let me just share the questions first to Mr. McShane. And it seems to be a little bit of clarity with regard to the Irish Gaisce system, award. And if you could perhaps clarify for the audience the recognition around this. So do the bronze participants in the Gaisce Award, do they need to do this program over consecutive weeks? So when it comes to the logistics of actually running the program, and the second part of the question being the recognition at the end, at the completion, are all participants awarded for their participation, and how is this process managed, or who awards this to them? Over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. So because this is a self-development program, we do feel it's an authentic service learning opportunity for the students. So it's student-led as much as possible, but participants do participate at least 1 hour per week in each of the 3 challenge areas. They can choose to manage activities in a way that suits them. So to answer the question, there's no time limit. So they can take more than 26 weeks to complete the award. The 26 weeks do not have to be consecutive. So participants can do activities every second week, for example, or they can take a break for a few weeks and resume activities when suits them. So doing the bronze award means committing to 26 weeks of activities. If they do more hours during the week, they don't get extra time. So it's more about the weeks rather than the hours in terms of their service action, their community involvement, and in terms of their physical preparation, their physical challenges. So in terms of what they receive at the end, okay, so it's actually, like we said, it's a national and internationally recognized presentation. What they do achieve is a medal, which arrives via post in a presentation box, a certificate signed by the president, and a nice little lapel pin also. So that is the recognition for the efforts that they've done over the 13 weeks plus 13 weeks plus the adventure journey, which is 2 days and 1 night. Just a little bit more in terms of what we're trying to achieve in terms of service action. We do hope and we do believe that through this learning experience that there will be times when the student will be taken out of their comfort zone. There will be times when things don't work in their favor. You know, there may be failings that they may have to adjust or to reevaluate, but in turn it builds resilience and our students are exposed to that opportunity. The fact that they are given the opportunity to choose their activities means that it's on their terms, and it's like I said, it's student led, and sometimes the learning is in the failure. So the whole idea of the service learning is to really develop and to take students out of their comfort zone, but at the same time to learn and to develop.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering those. I think that has addressed the questions that we have received, and it does touch on, I think John has already kindly covered. There was another question with regard to whether that journey needed to be supervised, or looking at the degree of what do we mean when we say be bold or be brave. And I think he's covered that in showing that the fluidity of this process, that this award allows to be developed or changed, that failures lead to reflections and adjustments, and that the full development can take place, and that the further opportunities can arise. I'm going to wrap up today with just summarizing, and I know that there have been a few attendees that have joined us a little bit later, so just for your sake, 5 takeaways or 5 things to remember that we hope that you may find value in, or potentially be able to implement in your respective schools or your organizations or institutions. The first one being to focus on positive reinforcement and encourage behavior for learning. What we mean by this, or to elaborate, is that students are independent and they need to be allowed to make mistakes and face the consequences of those mistakes and encourage responsible action. Telling them what they can't do is one thing, but we also need to tell them what they can do or how they should go about doing that. And a behavior for learning practice built on rights and responsibilities and encouraged through positive reinforcement and modeling and foregrounding is going to increase student agency and have a positive impact on their academic as well as personal development. The second take home, just to wrap up for you this morning, is that we need to remember that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom, okay? That it happens beyond, and it is a dynamic and it's an ongoing lifelong process. And service learning that we heard from Mr. McShane touched on this perfectly. So lending opportunities for real life experience gives greater value. It gives a sense of personal and civic responsibility, and it gives the learners a real world context. So acting beyond what's just going on between the 4 walls of the classroom. It also encourages the use of transferable skills, and we see that there is benefit in learning in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. And so this positive feedback loop exists where service learning is improving academics and vice versa, academics are lending to skills used outside. Thirdly, if we look at being prepared to make it happen, okay, we've looked at the flexibility factor, that we need to realize that sometimes timetables are really fixed or the curricula is really full, but being creative in our timetabling and thinking about what we can use, that it's already existing. The example of the Irish Goshke Award, or there's also the United Kingdom has the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and other countries may have similar ones, that we can use these to create opportunities. Okay, and our fourth, to just touch on that reading and the positive influence that reading for pleasure has on the school culture. The reading for pleasure that Mr. Finn chatted about and shared with us about the initiative in our school and linking it to structured talk and a shared reading environment has had or does have significant outcomes on academic performance as well as well-being of the individuals. So bringing reading for pleasure rather than for academic purpose or for a direct outcome, rather than having it on the fringe, making that a part of our everyday school lives, we're going to see that it improves competence and confidence in language, but it also develops collaboration or communication skills amongst our learners and colleagues. And the last take home to share today is to remind you all that we need to be brave and we need to be bold. All right. So the key to healthy lives and for well-being, which is what this entire session has been about, is all about increasing student agency. So are the learning activities meaningful? Are they relevant? Is there some kind of freedom that we can employ? But as well, we need to remember that it has structure and it has support, that we allow for mistakes, but we also take lessons from the consequences and we can reflect on those and learn from them. And this isn't only true for our learners, this is for us as professionals as well, that we sometimes need to be brave. We need to allow for the unexpected directions to be taken and for content to be developed in organic ways. And we need to be prepared that sometimes things don't go to plan, and we can use that as a learning opportunity as well. So let's enjoy the journey. And then lastly, just before we wrap up for today, I want to take the opportunity to say thank you to our 3 panel members from SEK Dublin International for sharing the 3 strategies that our school is using currently. Thank you to the event hosts, excuse me, of World Education Week, to the coordinators who have put this program together, the technical support behind the scenes, and of course you, our audience. Thank you for taking your time this morning to join us, and we hope that you may be able to implement the lessons that we have shared in enhancing well-being for learning outcomes. Please remember that anything you want to share, please use that hashtag, and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. All right, thank you very much.
Join Time Magazine's lead education reporter alongside global educators and advocates to explore the impacts of teaching forgiveness.
I teach forgiveness because it can have a positive impact in my students' families.
It helps my students thrive in the face of adversity.
Students who can forgive are happier.
Join us to hear from teachers and thought leaders on how and why to include forgiveness in your classroom.
Temperature rise will bring widespread devastation and unprecedented extreme weather.
New coronavirus cases emerge across the country.
Obesity rates have more than doubled in kids.
Cape Town is running out of water.